Hi, I'm Dr. Bertice Berry, and I need to tell you a story. My mother had gone most of her life without any long term hospital stays. She had one in her 40s when she had a heart attack. She gave birth to her 7 children and went to work the day after she was released. She didn't have any long stays. At 85, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor, which resulted in 5 heart attacks and 6 strokes over a 2 year period. So we were always in and out of the hospital. That first night, though, my mother was really frightened and afraid of what might happen. I was too. So I convinced that staff to let me stay in her room with her. I slept in what's called that chair bed. I really wish they would take bed out of that. Anyway, I also took with me a tool that most sociologists use for observation. You see, I had heard the same story that had been told over and over and over about hospitals. And in the rare times it is true, but that rare narrative that is sometimes true became the norm. And so, because I had heard that things happen in the hospital, I made sure that nothing happened to my mother. I carried my handy dandy journal and I wrote down everything that happened. Don't act like you've never been me. I wrote down everybody who came in her room, every medicine that was given to her. Most of the times I needed to ask how it was spelled. I wrote down every time they came in to check her for her pain. I wrote down everything that happened. I wrote who washed their hands and who washed their hands. But I was seeing through the eyes of fear, so there were some things that happened that I didn't really see. And one night when they woke my mother up to check her pain level, because I didn't understand that if you're in pain and no one knows it, that pain can cause you to go into distress and arrest. And because my mother has an AFib and so do I, that was something they were monitoring closely. So I looked through my notes. One of those nights I was up and I couldn't get back to sleep, so I looked through my notes. Sociologists know that it is in the patterns that we find the mistakes. You see, things don't go wrong because people are new at something. They go wrong because we are become comfortable with it. Anyway, I'm looking through my notes and I found something that was written in my hand, but I did not remember writing it. And it simply said this: Nurse came in and massaged Mom's feet. It was written in my handwriting, but I didn't remember writing it, and I surely didn't remember seeing it. And so, because I could not figure this out, and because I was stuck in the narrative that I had told myself, I made up a new narrative that would comply. Nurse came in, copied my handwriting, and wrote in my notes. I decided the next day I would pay close attention. You see, my mother's feet were a thing of legend in our house. My mother had been what was called back in the day a nurse's aide, and she worked at what was called a nursing home. We didn't have a car, so she walked to work. It was about maybe 3 miles there, 3 miles back. She walked every day. And because she had 7 children and wanted to make sure we had shoes, she had the same nursing shoes that had holes in the bottom. And my mother would line those shoes with newspaper. So in the rain and in the snow and in the heat, she walked in those shoes. Her nurse's stockings, pantyhose, and those shoes lined with newspaper. My mother, as a result, had the ugliest, smelliest feet on the planet. And we would joke about my mother's feet, even today, my children, her grandchildren will say, "It smells like Mom's feet." We all had chores. You had to wash dishes, take out trash, and rub Mom's feet. And every week we'd be at the negotiation table to see who was going to rub Mom's feet. So the next day I watch, and as if on cue, the nurse came in and massaged my mother's feet as if Michelangelo had carved them. She said, "How's this, Miss Berry?" My mother said, "Oh, that's so good. Thank you so much." What bothered me so much was that this thing, my mother's feet, that were a thing of legend, and this nurse's compassionate, loving care towards my mother's ugly, smelly feet, was missed by me because I was seeing through eyes of fear, through eyes of a narrative that was not true. through the eyes of, I don't know what's happening. And so instead of seeing the truth, I made up something else to fit that narrative that I already believed. This is how we can go down a path that is not true. This is how we can fill the void with things we make up to satisfy, to meet the needs of the narrative that's already there. When we process through a clear heart opens the eyes. And when you open your eyes, you can see the truth. And from that moment on, I knew the great heroes that our healthcare providers are. I noticed every person that came in that room to clean the room and how they'd come back on their days off just to spend time with my mother. I noticed how people who worked in administration came up to see her. And I noticed how the social worker saw signs of my mother's end and was aware enough to send someone to allow my mother to fill out her own living will just before it was time for her to go, so that the most important decision she needed to make was not made by me because it would have been wrong. It was made in this institution that we ignore, that we degrade, that we misunderstand. Yes, there are things that go wrong, but way too many times there are things that go right. And those are the things that we truly need to see, not only in their lives, but in our own. When you rewrite your story, when you go back and look over it, look at it through clear eyes. And the clear eyes come from a clear heart. I love you.